मैं पहुंच गया 1 मिनट में बताता हूँ ओके मेरे पास ये YouTube का फोन नहीं खुल रहा लिंक राइट हमजा भाई इज हियर एहसान भाई क्या आप मुझे यहाँ पे टेक्स्ट पे चैट में YouTube का लिंक भेज सकते हैं Okay, cool. Right, let's start with this. Welcome to our program, UKIM Leads Health in Ramadan webinar with Dr. Hamza Hussain. He's a GP registrar and works near Wakefield. Lives quite local to us near Ikra Center. We all pretty much know him. So without wasting any more time, we will let him start with his presentation. Following that, if you have questions, please leave them on either YouTube comments or Facebook comments, and we will try to incorporate as many of them we can. So over to you, Dr. Hamza.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can everybody hear me?
Walaikum salam. So only the you presenter and the organizers are logged into this Zoom chat, but it is going live on YouTube. So hopefully they will be able to hear you.
Assalamu alaikum. Can I request, Brother Hamza, if you can put your video on, if that's okay with you?
Share screen, yeah.
It should be on now.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, we can see it. Cheers.
Okay, that's fine. And can you see my screen now as well?
I can. So it's not the your presentation is not maximized.
Yeah. Okay, now?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli wa sallam wa barik ala nabiyyina Muhammad. For this opportunity to be able to deliver this webinar to you on health and medicine management. Just reflecting on this point, actually, while we're in this lockdown period, we're very fortunate to be able to have access to technology now, that we're able to continue our learning, to be able to communicate in the comfort of our own homes. And I thank UKMEs for this opportunity as well. I say is the webinar that they've been doing, and this is the second part of this series of webinars and allow us to prepare for the month of Ramadan. So without further ado, let's get into the presentation. So I also want to start by a disclaimer in the presentation. And it's important that whatever is going to be discussed in this presentation is general advice on how to actually manage health and also conditions which people may have in addition to fasting. It's not there to advise specific people on their individual conditions, and what's really recommended is that they consult their own medical practitioner with regard to their own specific health problems. So I will give you a general overview, some general points that you'll be able to take. But then I would really encourage you, if you've got health problems specifically that may affect your ability to fast, is to consult your own medical practitioner. So, as I mentioned, this is a series that you can be doing about enabling us to all to have a successful Ramadan. And health is just part of that equation in order for us to be able to benefit the most from Ramadan. We already had the webinar yesterday by Sheikh Abu Sundus on the spirituality side of things and also to the fifth of Ramadan as well. And this is hopefully going to complement that with regards to how to actually maximize our health in order that we can, inshallah, have a successful Ramadan. So this presentation has been sort of put together with using my own experience, but also experience from other organizations as well that sort of fed into this presentation. This is the first time I'm actually delivering this actually in a webinar format. Normally this is done by a sort of a face-to-face audience. So this is a sort of a unique way of actually delivering this for me. In terms of what we hope to cover on this webinar and this presentation is to talk a little bit about the research into the benefits of fasting. And I also want to be able to portray what happens to our bodies when we fast, so you have an understanding of what actually happens. And then also to actually talk about nutrition and exercise and also sleep as well. Then moving on to medicines and which medicines are okay for us to take if we are fasting and which medicines will affect our fast. And then I'm going to touch on some specific conditions, mainly diabetes, but also some other conditions as well, which affect our ability to fast and how to actually safely fast if we have those conditions. And then a little bit about, as we're in this pandemic, a little bit about the COVID-19 pandemic. So in relation to Ramadan itself, that will be towards the end, and then a question and answer section.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Hamza. I'm sorry to interrupt you here. Your audio is not very clear. It hasn't been. Can you check your mic system?
Yeah, clear now?
It is better, much better now. Yes.
Okay. Fine, that's fine. Sorry, I was simply just a bit further away from me.
No, there was a distortion. It was not
Right.
just that you being on a distance. But yeah, carry on, please. Sorry.
Okay, fine. Is it clear now?
It is, yes.
Okay, sorry. So I don't know how much was missed.
I would say a lot from the beginning, but if you can recap, that's fine. But you can carry on.
So as I was saying, just the contents of this webinar. So apologies for the sound. So in terms of the contents, what we hope to cover in this webinar is hopefully to talk about the research into the benefits of fasting and also what actually happens to our body when we fast. And then also to move on to talk about nutrition, exercise, and sleep. And then cover medicines themselves in relation to which medicines that we are able to take safely in Ramadan and which ones will actually affect our fasting. And then move on to talk about some specific conditions in relation to fasting that may affect our ability to fast, such as diabetes, for example. And then talk about the current pandemic that we're in and how it will affect our Ramadan or what impact it will have on our fasting. And then hopefully, inshallah, open the floor up to questions for the audience to be able to ask on that. Okay, so there's a number of ways to actually deliver this. Health is a broad category, and health, we know, has shares a relationship with fasting, an interdependent relationship, where health affects our fasting in terms of our ability and the quality of our fast, but also the other way around as well, where fasting actually affects our health. And as you'll see later on, there are actually benefits to be gained from fasting, although primarily we don't fast for the benefits to our health, but there are benefits that can be gained from that. So these are some of the benefits, the health benefits to fasting, and there's a number of different studies that are out there, some conflicting results, but broadly speaking, these are some of the benefits that have been identified in relation to fasting. And that's not just fasting the way we do it. There's also, as you may be aware, there's also this intermittent fasting, and that's become a sort of a trend recently as well. And studies have looked into the intermittent fasting side of things as well. And these are some of the benefits. As you can see, there's quite a broad range of benefits to the body of fasting. And these are just an outline of some of the studies that were looked into in relation to some of the blood parameters, such as the cholesterol, the triglyceride, which are the breakdown products of fats, but also on inflammation as well. So there's a broad range of health benefits there. One in specific, which I thought was very interesting, you might have heard of someone called Michael Mosley, who's a British personality, celebrity personality, who's got the background in the medical profession. And he's basically the author of the fast diet, or the 5-2 diet. And he basically mentioned about something called the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is basically released. There's increased levels in those people who fast, and that's actually shown to actually reduce depression and anxiety, as well as reduce the risk of developing dementia. So not only does fasting have a benefit for our mind, our body, and our soul, but also our mind as well. So it's very, very comprehensive benefits to our mind, body, and soul. I just wanted to actually talk about as well of what actually happens to our bodies when we fast. So when we fast, our bodies enter into a state of fasting sort of 8 hours or so after our last meal. So normally what happens is we use glucose, which is our main energy source for the different types of cells in our body. Now, we do have stores of this glucose in the liver, for example. So our body starts to utilize these stores, and once these stores have been utilized, our body starts to use fat for energy. So as you can glean from this is, if we fast, once we use our glucose stores, then our body will start to break down fat and start to use the energy source from fat for the cells in our body. So we can actually lose weight if we fast properly, and also what we eat as well after we fast. Moving on to nutrition then. So it's really important, and I can't stress this enough, to have suhoor, or to do suhoor, which is a pre-dawn meal. And we're encouraged in various hadith. And one example, one hadith is there, tasaharu fa in bis-sahuri baraka, which is a hadith which is found in Bukhari and Muslim, that our Prophet ﷺ encourages to have suhoor because in it is barakah. And we find that by having suhoor, this will give us energy that we need to be able to fast safely, and to be able to not feel the fast as much. And it's important that when we have suhoor, that we have a balanced meal. So what's really good is complex carbohydrates. So things like porridge, oats, things like the grains, barley, all these are very good sources of energy which release glucose slowly in our body. So these are the types of food that are recommended when we actually have our suhoor in the morning. And dates as well. I mean, dates are a very good natural source of sugars, and they also contain fiber and minerals, and dates are what are encouraged for us to actually break our fast with. And that's what our Prophet Muhammad actually broke his fast with, if available. There is a link there that I wanted to share as well. I'll just bring it up on our webinar. Just bear with me. Can everybody see the outline in front of me here for the meal and fitness plan?
I can see the slide with nutrition on it.
All right, okay, sorry, yeah. Right, okay, can you see? Yeah.
No, I can.
Okay, so this is a meal and fitness plan which is shared by a productive Muslim. And as you can see, this is a suggested ideas for our suhoor, but also our iftar as well. And I encourage people to have a look at this and to sort of familiarize themselves with the types of food which one can have. And there's a wide range of foods that one can have available. And there's also some recipes at the bottom as well. So by eating healthy food doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be bland or tasteless food. That there's actually a wide variety that's available, and very tasty food as well. So it's just accustoming our palate to be able to get accustomed to the different varieties that are out there really. So I'll just go back to the presentation. Okay, so in terms of just elaborating on the actual food that we should have, there's something called the Eat Well plate, which is a sort of a template of food that we should have to have a balanced meal really. So as you can see, the proportion of the actual sizes of the pies in this plate correspond to the amount of that food substance that we should have in our meals. So as you can see, we should be getting a large amount of our daily intake from fruit and vegetables, and also carbohydrates such as pasta, rice, potatoes, and actually the fats should be a smaller proportion of our diet. So this is something that will be able to help aid us in terms of what food we should be having. In addition to actually food, it's important that we also stay hydrated as well. Now, we're in Ramadan now, as we're moving backward now, and the fasts are getting shorter. Nevertheless, we're still in the period where fasts are still, we're fasting for more than sort of 10, 12 hours really in the day. So it's important that we do adequately stay hydrated when we're allowed to eat and drink. And the government recommend sort of 6 to 8 cups or glasses of water per day. And water is very, very important because it regulates our body temperature, helps in regulating that. It helps in our bodily function, the reactions of our body. So it's really important. And it's important also because our body doesn't store water like it stores the glucose, as we mentioned previously, that we have glucose stores in our liver, whereas our bodies don't necessarily store water, although our bodies are made up of water, so 60% or so of water, but it's not in a storage form. So it's important that we do stay adequately hydrated. So sources of water are not just water itself, but also fruit and vegetables are a good source of water. So things like watermelon is a very good source, and other fruits and vegetables, but also the food that we eat as well. So 20% of our daily water intake we actually get from food. So it's really important that we bear that in mind. Also, not to forget exercise as well. So nutrition plays a part, but it's also important that we do exercise. And I know it's difficult now that we're in this lockdown period, but we can utilize the part of the freedom the government have given us to be able to go out for you know a walk, for example, which we can do maybe after the iftar, or we can do maybe inside our own homes, to do maybe a pre-meal workout before iftar or before suhoor. So it's important that we utilize that time as well to be able to do that exercise, and it's important to make it light as well, and not too heavy, especially before iftar time as well. So you know you don't want to be getting to a state where you become dizzy and you faint, but light exercise is fine. In terms of sleep, now sleep's very interesting actually, and Ramadan is a time where we do sacrifice our sleep, and we do sleep less than what we normally accustomed to throughout the year. But it's important that the sleep that we do get, that it's actually we focus on the quality and we maximize that sleep in order for us to be able to function adequately and make the most of our ibadah. So we have something called the sleep cycle, which is basically the different stages of sleep that all of us undergo. And it's divided into non-rapid eye movement sleep and the rapid eye movement sleep. And each cycle, on average, one sleep cycle lasts about 90 minutes. Some people are longer, some people are shorter, but the average is 90 minutes. Now, why that's important is that generally, average human being, average human adult, it's recommended that we have at least 5 of these sleep cycles in 24 hours. So that's 7 to 8 hours of sleep per day. Now in Ramadan, especially in the summer months, it's very difficult to get that amount of sleep. So one way of looking at it is to actually look at this and divide your sleep into the sleep cycles. So what research has shown is that if you wake up in the middle of your sleep cycle, when you're in a deep sleep, so when you're in stages 3 or stage 4 of your sleep cycle, then you're going to wake up feeling very groggy, and you're going to feel, you're going to have sleep inertia, which is, where you wake up and you're not able to function. It takes you a while. Whereas if you were to wake up toward the end of your sleep cycle, or just as soon as you enter the other sleep cycle, then you're more likely to wake up fresh and alert. So one way is to divide the amount of sleep that you get into 90-minute slots. So for example, if you're going to go to sleep between a certain amount of time, to try and divide it into the various different, how many number of 90-minute slots you can get into your sleep. So that way, when you wake up, that you wake up energetic and you wake up feeling refreshed. Now moving on to talk about medicines and in relation to specific conditions as well. Now, I don't want to go too much into the fiqh related to medicine, but just sort of broadly speaking, the Islamic Fiqh Council gathered regarding to discuss the permissibility of certain forms of medication, and they basically came with a sort of different categories of medicine which are permissible. Now, things like, for example, sublingual medications, which are medications that go under your tongue, or inhalers, or medications that are going to via your nose, or certain medications such as creams that you rub onto your skin. All these are deemed permissible. Now, yes, there is difference of opinion in regards to some aspects, but generally speaking, these forms of medication are permissible to take, provided that they're not providing any nutrition. And this is a table from the Islamic Fiqh Council there when they got together about the different routes of medication which are permissible, but also certain types of investigations and procedures which are also permissible as well. Things like blood tests, for example, there's something which are there is again a different opinion with regards to that, but generally speaking, they are permissible. And investigative procedures are also permissible as well, and various other different types of medical investigations. But it's important to bear in mind if things can be safely postponed, then it's better to do so. However, if something cannot be postponed and it's needed, then it's important for one to know that they are able to continue with their fast, providing that it's not a form of nutrition for them. Moving on to talk about diabetes itself then. So diabetes is a condition which is quite prevalent, especially among the South Asian population. And diabetes, broadly speaking, there are different types or forms of diabetes, but broadly speaking, you've got diabetes where the person doesn't produce enough of something called insulin, which is a hormone that we have in our body that allows us to be able to utilize that glucose, or it can be due to where the actual insulin doesn't work properly. So you can think of it as something like a key and lock. So the key is the actual insulin and the lock is in our cells. So the insulin is needed to be able to open the lock so glucose can enter and our body can utilize it. But in some people, they don't produce enough of it. And some people, they do produce insulin, but it doesn't work as properly or work as it should. Now, it's important that those people who do have diabetes, that they actually consult with their doctor about whether they, first of all, whether it's safe for them to be able to fast. And if it is, then how they can safely do that. Now, it's important that they do have a medication. There's various medication that is available for people who have diabetes. So it's important that they consult with their doctor and to be able to get advice on whether their medications can be changed from, for example, taking something that they may need to take 3 times a day to maybe taking twice a day, for example. And it's really important to be able to, those people who are on insulin, for example, or other types of medication which will lower their blood glucose, that they regularly check their blood glucose throughout the day whilst fasting, and that's something that doesn't actually break the fast, and it will actually help them to be able to fast very, very safely. And I just wanted to actually just share a short video that was put together about explaining about diabetes and how to manage that. So I'll just bring that up now. Okay, can everybody...
During the holy month of Ramadan is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. Certain groups can be exempt from fasting, such as people with diabetes. However, many people with diabetes choose to fast. Fasting with diabetes can increase the risk of low or high blood glucose, dehydration, and diabetic ketoacidosis. Therefore, it's important for people with diabetes to know their risk before fasting. What to do during Ramadan? Before Ramadan starts, consult your doctor to learn about your potential risk. Check your blood glucose levels more often during the fast. Drink plenty of water during non-fasting hours. Follow a varied and balanced diet. If you feel unwell, break the fast immediately. Consult your doctor after Ramadan ends. Remember that measuring your blood glucose and injecting insulin will not break the fast. The key to a healthy Ramadan with diabetes is knowing your risk. Consult your doctor and speak to your local imam for more information. This message is brought to you by the International Diabetes Federation and the Diabetes and Ramadan International Alliance.
Okay, so that was just a short video which just sort of outlined about diabetes and fasting. And this slide just highlights when what is recommended to actually check their blood glucose for those who have diabetes. So it's important to check it regularly. So to check it just before they have their pre-dawn meal, and also to check it during the day whilst they're fasting as well, just so they can keep an eye on their blood sugars and they know when their blood sugar is dropping too low, for example, which may mean that they might have to actually break their fast. There are some people, however, who have diabetes that it's really important that they do not fast, and that the actual risk of fasting for them is very serious. So, for example, this was a information that was put together by the International Diabetes Foundation, which, for example, lists there are certain categories of people who are very high risk. For example, those people who have, had previous episodes of low blood glucose, or which we call hypoglycemia. Those people who don't have awareness of when their blood sugar is dropping really low. Those people who have diabetes which is really poorly controlled. That is really recommended that they actually do not fast, because it's something that would be very serious detriment to their health. But there are some people who are lower risk and have diabetes, and for them, they can safely fast, providing that they adhere to the medical advice that enables them to fast safely. So one of the risks, which is we normally advise people who have diabetes to watch out for, are what we call hypos, which is where we have low blood sugar, and that's typically when it goes less than 4. And some of the signs that people may have when they have a hypo is they may start to have a headache, they might start to notice that they're not able to think clearly, they might start to feel dizzy, lightheaded, and that's some of the signs that they may be having a hypo. And if somebody has experience where they may be showing signs of having a hypo, that it's important that they do check their blood glucose, and if it is 4 or less, that they sort of immediately really break their fast with something which is quick releasing, for example, such as having, if they've got access to glucose tablets, for example, or having something like a fruit juice or apple or orange juice, or having sugar or honey. So these are things that are recommended, and then following that up with having something which is more longer acting. So maybe having a sandwich, for example. So it will mean that they will have to break their fast and actually make that fast up, but it's important that they do not continue with their fast if they're actually having a hypo. Also, on the other end, you've actually got where people may have too high of a blood glucose, which is also dangerous as well. And typically that's found in those people who are taking insulin. So people who have type 1 diabetes, for example, but it can also happen in people who have type 2 diabetes. And this is where one of the reasons may be that they're not taking enough of their insulin and their blood glucose levels are really high. And that can lead to dehydration. And some of the signs for that are thirst. Again, they might have headaches, they might feel extremely tired. And what can happen is, because they're not getting enough insulin, their body's not able to use that glucose, and therefore that body starts to produce something called ketones, which are very acidic, and that can lead to dehydration and affect the other bodily functions as well. And people are at risk of death from this. So it's really important that they regularly monitor their blood sugars, and they take measures appropriately. In terms of adjustments, as I alluded to earlier, if people have diabetes, and if they're on certain medication, for example, that needs to be taken 3 times a day, then speaking to their health professional, their medical practitioner, about maybe seeing if they can change to maybe something that might be able to be taken twice a day, for example, or once a day. And if they're on insulin, how to safely adjust that insulin dosaging as well, because they're not going to be having their normal meal frequency. So it's important that they're able to adjust that safely. And going to what I said earlier about at suhoor time, to have those foods which are slow releasing, so we have energy throughout the day. this is just something that was, again, highlights about those people who are high risk with relation to their diabetes and that they shouldn't actually fast. And those people who are, it's safe to do so, they choose to fast. And then certain types of medication, if they're on, for example, if they're on metformin, there are different frequencies that you can take that. So again, all this advice to speak to your usual medical practitioner with regards to actually how to safely manage your diabetes and fast. Just a little bit about other conditions. So for example, if you have asthma, you should continue taking your steroid inhaler. So as I mentioned previously, the inhalers, taking the inhaler doesn't actually break your fast. It's not a form of nutrition. So people who are fasting, if you can take your inhaler during the time that you can eat and drink, then fine, that's safer to do so. But if you can't, it's really important that you continue with your inhalers, otherwise you risk having an asthma exacerbation or worsening your asthma. And if, for example, you do feel wheezy or you do feel like your asthma is playing up, then you can use your reliever inhaler, which is the, usually the blue inhaler, if you're feeling wheezy. So it's important you do take that, and you can continue with your fast breathing in there. If you're in a state where you're needing oxygen, for example, then that probably suggests something more serious, and maybe it's better not to fast in that state. A common ailment that we may sort of undergo, especially during the initial first few days of fasting, are headaches. So that can be due to various reasons. So that can be due to if we're accustomed to having a high caffeine intake, for example, and when we're fasting, we're not having our usual cups of tea or coffee, then we may have a headache due to that. Or we may not have replenished our fluid stores and therefore have a headache due to dehydration, or that we're not sleeping as well and therefore have a headache. So there's a number of different reasons why people may have a headache whilst they're fasting, but generally the first few days afterwards, then the body becomes accustomed and the body starts to adapt. And actually we have something called endorphins, which are the body's natural painkillers that are released. So they tend to subside. But it's a good time to actually, if people maybe they have an addiction to caffeine, for example, it's a good time to be able to reduce that and to be able to manage that. But if someone does have a headache, then there are things that one can do or measures that they can take to try and help them. So for example, as I mentioned previously, it's important that one adequately hydrates themselves at the time that they can eat and drink, that they actually make sure that they have their pre-dawn meal and they have a good healthy pre-dawn meal, so they have their slow energy stores which are being released throughout the day. And if one was to have a headache, for example, then one cannot take a tablet, for example, but there are other ways to manage that headache. For example, massage, or using things like topical, which are creams and gels, which are painkillers that can be rubbed on. All these can be used and the person can continue their fast. But if they were to take a painkiller, for example, like paracetamol, then that would break their fast. And certain people, if they've got uncontrolled migraines, then they're advised not to fast because it can severely affect their health. As I mentioned about painkillers, like there are different types of painkillers. So it doesn't necessarily have to come in a tablet form. There are even pain patches, for example. For those people who suffer from chronic pain, which is ongoing, which has been there for maybe months, then they can maybe speak to their health practitioner about maybe seeing if they can actually switch to a patch, for example, which is put onto the skin and it releases painkiller throughout the day, and therefore it doesn't actually invalidate their fast. Some people may suffer from indigestion or heartburn, and that can be due to, for example, at iftar time when they actually have their meal, that they actually have things like oily deep fried or spicy food, and that can aggravate or increase acidity, and that can cause heartburn. So it's important that to, again, going back to having a healthy, balanced diet to try and combat that. But if one wants to have that, then, it's fine for them to be able to take things like Gaviscon, or if they're on medication for that, then to take that with their, before their pre-dawn meal, for example. In those who have kidney failure, those who are receiving dialysis, for example, which is a type of therapy for those people who have kidney failure, then they're advised not to fast, especially on the day that they have their dialysis, because it's a form of nutrition for the body, so they can't actually fast on the days they have it. However, if it's safe to do so, then they may fast on the days that they don't have their dialysis, or they may, if they're able to have their dialysis during the night, for example, then they can fast during the day. But again, this would need to be spoken with their, or have a discussion with their medical practitioner about their dialysis regime and whether it's safe for them to be able to fast on whilst receiving dialysis. Now moving on to talk about the coronavirus and COVID-19 in relation to fasting and Ramadan. Now, it's important to always follow the latest government advice, and the advice, is changing because it's a very fluid and dynamic situation that we're in. So it's important to always keep up to date with what the current government advice is. But general advice, which has been there and which will generally stay there, such as social distancing, for example, it's important we adhere to that. So, Ramadan is a time of the year where, often we get together with our friends and family, especially at iftar time, that we invite people and that we have communal iftars. I think it's important that during this pandemic that we actually refrain from that and just stick to having our iftar at home with our family and not really inviting people, although, which is good to do in normal circumstances, but, then that would obviously risk causing the transmission of the infection. So it's important that we avoid that. And in relation to the Taraweeh prayers, that we actually pray them in our homes, as you know, with the massages being closed, that Taraweeh prayers won't be happening in the massages. But it's important that one then doesn't invite people to their homes, maybe, friends getting together and have Taraweeh prayers in their homes. Again, it defeats the purpose of having this social isolation and social distancing. So it's important that one prays the Taraweeh just with their immediate household, or prays by themselves. These are just some of the measures that in relation to the coronavirus, in relation to fasting. So it's important that we adhere to that. So that's the end of the presentation. Apologies again about the sound at the beginning, but I hope that was rectified later on. So now I'll actually hand back and open the webinar for any questions that people may have.
Thank you, Dr. Hamza. That was very informative. Yes, the voice issue was gone for most parts afterwards. So far we don't have any questions on the YouTube channel, but I do have a question for myself,
Yeah.
just to get everyone started. So on the subject of corona, sometimes we get a little cough, some fever, and that's usual. We usually can push through and continue our fast. But in context of corona, since there's no way of knowing whether it is corona or not, or corona related or not, how do we decide, or how does that affect our ability to fight corona if we choose to continue to fast?
Okay, so the question is that if we have a cough, how do we tell if we've got corona?
No, the question is, should we be continuing fasting?
Okay, so in relation to that, then again, that depends on individual case-by-case basis. So, you know, like for example, if one was to have a flu or a cold, for example, now, you know, some people with flu are severely affected, and you know, people can die from flu, but some people have mild symptoms. So similarly with corona, yes, you know, as the number of deaths are increasing, and you know, in the UK now we've passed 16,000 deaths, which is, you know, an incredible number, that 80% or so will have the coronavirus or the COVID-19 disease. They will have mild symptoms, and 15% will have more severe symptoms, and 5% of those will actually need, you know, intensive care support. So again, it's a case-by-case basis. So to actually say a blanket saying that, you know, everybody who, you know, has a potential, has the COVID-19 disease, that they shouldn't fast, I think that's, you know, one is unable to make that as a blanket statement. But again, it's case-by-case basis. So if one is feels that their ability, that they've just got mild symptoms and that they can continue their fast, then you know, that's a decision that they can make, and they can continue their fast. But if it's to the point where it's, you know, very severe and it's really impacting on their breathing, or they're needing hospital admission, then in that case, then you know, it would be safer perhaps not to fast in that case.
Nice one. So since the advice is changing, and it is a fluid situation, and there's not much research around this issue of corona, um, is is this a good advice to keep yourself hydrated better, or does it have no impact? Because I've heard the suggestion that the better you hydrate, the better your chance to fight off corona once you acquire this.
I don't know of any relation specific in terms of the link of hydration and the current coronavirus that we have, but generally speaking, hydration, keeping ourselves hydrated, will give us a better chance in fighting any infection, you know, because as I mentioned previously, it's important that, you know, water is important for many of our bodily functions. You know, it helps in regulating our temperature, in helping us cooling us down, in helping our bodily processes. So it's really important that we keep ourselves hydrated anyway, as for general health benefits. So certainly it will have a positive impact in being able to fight disease and fight infection. But specifically in terms of corona, then I don't know of any specific in relation to hydration and its impact on corona. But generally speaking, then yes, you know, it's important to keep ourselves hydrated, and someone who's better hydrated, then you know, they will have a better chance of fighting infection, and generally for their health.
Nice one. So that's all from my side. I still don't have. Yeah, there's a question here on the YouTube. I'll read it out for you. Could you please elaborate on intravenous injections and inhalers? Do they invalidate fasting?
Okay, so as I mentioned, there is difference of opinion, but sort of generally speaking, which seems to be the more majority opinion, when it comes to inhalers, then inhalers themselves do not invalidate the fast, because they're not a form of nutrition. So things like inhalers that are used for asthma, or people who have what we call COPD or emphysema, then they're fine to use their inhaler and continue with their fast. If they can take their inhalers during, for example, their school time or at iftar time, because generally, you know, inhalers tend to be, you know, once a day or twice a day, then that's safer. But if, for example, they can't, then they are safe to take their or they, you know, they can take their inhaler and continue with their fast. In regards to actual intravenous medication, then again, it depends on what that, so intravenous, for those who don't know, is where you've got medication going directly into the bloodstream via a vein. So again, it depends on the category, but generally, broadly speaking, most intravenous medication, you know, things like fluids, you know, drips, for example, generally, you know, I do provide a form of nutrition. So generally, they're will invalidate the fast. So intravenous one, again, it depends on what it is, but generally speaking, that does invalidate the fast, whereas inhalers are fine to use. Allahu Ta'ala a'lam.
Hi. Yeah, you've gone silent there, Dr. Hamza.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for that. Does insulin count as it is still okay to take because it's not intravenous anyway?
Yeah, absolutely. So insulin is absolutely fine to take, and it doesn't invalidate. And it's very important as well that those who are on insulin, that they take it properly and they take the adequate amount of insulin. So it's really important that they understand that insulin is fine to take, and they must take that if they are able to, if they're to continue safely fasting, then they must take their insulin. And I can't stress that point enough, because as I mentioned previously, if they don't take enough of that insulin, then they may put themselves at risk of having what we call hyperglycemia, where they have too high a blood sugar, and therefore they risk themselves becoming dehydrated and actually put themselves of death. So similarly, it's important that they take their insulin.
Okay. There's a fiqhi question here. There's a fiqhi question here, but it should be all right for you to answer. The brother just asked, does brushing your teeth break your fast? I assume that he's asking about using toothpaste.
Yeah. So again, that's more of I suppose, a fiqhi question as relation to medicine. So I mean, again, I would probably advise on speaking to a consulting local imam or relation to that question. But again, there is again the different opinion on whether toothpaste itself or brushing. But again, I would, for those kind of questions, I would advise speaking to your local imam in relation to that specific question.
Cool. So I don't have any more questions on YouTube here. Brother Etisam, do you have any more questions from Facebook or yourself?
No, we have no questions so far.
All right, nice one. That pretty much concludes our program for today. I'll just remind you that since the masajid and Islamic centers are all closed, these centers do rely on donations, weekly, Friday donations, etc., to run their functions, and the expenses are not just have not just disappeared because we are not going there anymore. There are bills to pay. So we will finish the link to make donations to UKM Leeds for ICRA Center and Linkfield Center under this chat as well, and under the YouTube video. Please donate as much as you used to, at least. And thank you in advance for that. Also, we have our social media presence, which is increasing. Thanks for the Dawa team and Brother Sam. Thanks for that. We will publish those links as well. We are there on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, etc. And you can follow us there. Thank you very much. And have a nice evening. Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Hamza. Yeah, we'll close the program there. Cheers. Amin. Thank you. Bye. Wa alaikum assalam.